I'm Dr. Amable. I'm tasked to discuss to you about the malignant tumors of the nose and the paranasal sinuses. So here are my objectives. So one, to enumerate the symptoms of PNS malignancies, to outline the different malignant neoplasms that involves the paranasal sinuses, to discuss the diagnostic modalities in diagnosing PNS malignancies, and to present treatment options for diagnosed patients with PNS malignancies. Okay. So malignant tumors of the nose and the paranasal sinuses often present in already advanced stages. And this presents or grows in anatomically complex structures and regions that contain a lot of vital structures, like for example, the eye and of course the CNS. Treatment may involve removing vital structures in the PNS region and its adjacent organs. So less than 5% of nose and PNS malignancies consists of less than 5% of all head and neck cancers, and it mostly involves the older age group, more than 50 to 60 years old. The maxillary sinus is the most common site, followed by the nasal cavity and then the ethmoid sinus. Involvement of the frontal sinus and sphenoid sinus are rare, but if it's involved, it's correlated more to be malignant in pathology and offers a poor prognosis. Okay. So as you can see, most of its symptoms are very non-specific and may easily be neglected by patients, especially those who don't have ready access to healthcare. And this is why when we see patients, most of them are already in advanced stage, and it might be too late to just do a conservative approach. So its symptoms, patient may complain of diplopia or vision loss, and this is most often manifested by the mass compressing or invading the orbit and may result from direct involvement of the optic nerve or the oculomotor nerves at the orbital apex or the cavernous sinus. Patient may also complain of epiphora,
Recording in
uh,
progress.
and it's caused by obstruction or infiltration of the lacrimal duct situated in the anteromedial aspect of the maxilla. Patient may also complain of facial swelling and malocclusion. This could result from bone destruction and advancement of the tumor into the soft tissues of the face or the mouth. This was another complaint. And this was a far advanced tumor invading the muscles of mastication, most commonly the pterygoid muscles. Neck mass, okay, or lymphadenopathy. So these are palpable metastatic adenopathies in the jugular chain, and this another sign of advanced disease. Hearing loss, okay. This usually results from nasopharyngeal extension of the tumor that obstructs the eustachian tube, and this finding is important because nasopharyngeal extension of disease may usually precludes a clear resection margin in this area. Patient may also complain of facial numbness, which is also a manifestation of tumor invasion of the portions of the trigeminal nerve. Could be solely at the maxillary sinus, or it could also affect the pterygopalatine fossa, which is behind the maxillary sinus. So in physical examination, you may note that the patient may have nasal, facial, or intraoral mass. The intranasal mass is often necrotic, but polypoid mucosa may obscure the underlying tumor tissue in the nose. Facial swelling results when an antral tumor erodes into the soft tissues of the cheek, and whitening of the upper alveolar ridge or development of loose non-vital teeth may be the earliest sign of inferior bony invasion. So palatal mass and ulceration are evidence of more advanced disease. Uh, you may also note proptosis or mild protrusion of the eye, which may be consistent with tumor compression of the periorbita without frank invasion. But often it reflects intraorbital tumor and implies an advanced disease. Cranial nerve deficits, okay, which is the most commonly involved nerves, would be cranial nerves 2, 3, 4, uh, V1, K2 and cranial nerve 6. So involvement of the cranial nerves is manifestation of advanced disease and indicates poor prognosis. And of course, again, the cervical lymphadenopathys, which would mean metastasis. So until the tumor has infiltrated a cranial or facial nerve or has grown sufficiently to obstruct a sinus ostium, it is silently advancing in size and of course extent. Okay, so discovering an asymptomatic sinus tumor at an early stage is rare, and the patient would be very fortunate to have it diagnosed at an early stage. Okay, so in terms of location, first we have the maxillary sinus, and the most prognostically significant structure above the this sinus are behind and above the maxillary antrum. So superior to this structure, you have the orbit and the ethmoid sinus. And then posterior to it, you have the pterygoid plates, the pterygoid space, the infratemporal fossa, and there are also structures in this area that you may need to access for hemostasis. So even if there are no lesions found in this area, like for example, the internal maxillary artery could be um, ligated uh, behind the posterior maxillary wall. So that would be the pterygopalatine fossa. Okay. So next you have the ethmoid sinus, which are found supermedial to the maxillary sinus. So as with the antrum, the least worrisome directions of spread from the ethmoid sinus are inferior to the antrum and medial to the nasal cavity. Uh, a greater concern regarding this sinus is the fovea ethmoidalis and the cribriform plate, which provides a little barrier to intracranial spread. Uh, Evidence of intracranial spread requires consideration of an anterior craniofacial resection. And the lateral wall consists of thin bone or the lamina papyracea, which also provides little resistance to neoplastic invasion, and the eye would most likely be involved. Okay. So next we have the sphenoid sinus. So it's located in the center of the head. The sphenoid sinus is immediately adjacent to very complex vital structures, as I've said before. Um, For this reason, complete resection of malignant tumor involving the sphenoid is usually not possible because superior to it, you have of course, the brain, okay? Uh, postero Superior to it, you have the pituitary gland. Um, on the sides or the lateral to it, you have the carotid arteries. Okay? So anterior to the sinus, of course, the ethmoidal air cells. Inferior to it, the median nerve, the clivus, and the nasopharynx. So the bone of the lateral wall is usually less than 0.5 millimeters thick, and it's not commonly dehiscent. And lastly, for the sinuses, you have the frontal sinus, and this sinus usually, is least frequently involved in malignant tumors. So it is bounded anteriorly by the soft tissues of the scalp, inferiorly by the dense frontal beak of the frontal bone, then the ethmoid cells, and the orbit, and then posteriorly you have the anterior cranial fossa. So just because of its location and relationship with adjacent structures that makes the prognosis poorer compared to the nasal cavity, the maxillary sinus, and the ethmoid sinus pathologies. Okay. Not part of the sinuses, the lymphatics. Okay. But Ongren emphasized the importance of precise understanding of the lymphatic drainage of the nose and the paranasal sinuses as a prerequisite to adequate therapy. So he said that the established dictum that these tumors do not often metastasize. And he also said that he said that they do metastasize, but the critical or clinical evidence of early metastasis is absent because the primary drainage is to the lateral and the retropharyngeal node. So it's deep within the neck and would not be palpable or easily seen. So he believed that relative success of his therapy hinged on electrocoagulation and irradiation of the rich lymphatic channels passing from the nose and the paranasal sinuses posteriorly to the retropharynx, which remains an important therapeutic concept. Okay, so let's go now to diagnostic imaging that we can use for nose and PNS malignancy. So first we have the CT scan. So it is the initial imaging modality of choice for paranasal sinuses because it's superior to MRI for detection of bony involvement. CT scan is also particularly helpful in evaluation of tumor involvement of the retroorbital and the orbital apex region. So, so this is where the central density or central low density region of fat surrounding the optic nerve with radial arrangement of the extraocular muscles. So loss of this plane implies advanced disease because the veins in this area extend directly to the cavernous sinus. So CT scan is also important in assessing infiltration of the nasopharynx, where normal anatomy consists of very thin layer of mucosa over the medial pterygoid plate, and thickening in this region implies tumor infiltration or involvement. So when evaluation of intracranial extension is necessary, contrast-enhanced CT scan may improve the definition of the tumor from adjacent plate. Okay. So the MRI on the preoperative assessment of the tumor extent has been dramatic, and the combination of CT scan to evaluate changes in the bony architecture of the cranial and facial structures with MRI to define the soft tissue extent of diseases, introduced new era in staging and planning treatment of sinus neoplasms. Um, the particular benefit of MRI is its ability to differentiate the tissue density and predict with accuracy the difference between tumor and retained secretions in the sinuses. So by using the T1 and T2 weighted images with dye enhancement. So an experienced neuroradiologist will be able to differentiate between um, tumor and mucus. Sorry. So angiography may be appropriate, especially if the lesion demonstrates enhancement during initial CT scan or contrast CT. So this approximates the carotid system. So this modality can also be helpful in the evaluation of unusual tumors involving the phenoid sinus and the skull base. So in the instance of vascular tumors involving the sinuses, angiography may be essential in assessing the tumor extent and delineation of feeding vessels and as an approach for embolization when it's deemed necessary and safe. Okay? This will also help us in um, evaluating the feeding vessels of the malignant tumor and some benign tumors as well. Okay. So PET scan is of little use in assessing local tumor extent, but it can play a role in evaluating the presence of metastatic disease before extensive oncologic surgery or with or without concomitant chemotherapy. So this is a pre-treatment um, okay. So pre-treatment PET scan, so study improves the optimal baseline for post-treatment decision making. Okay. So often a paranasal sinus or a nasal cavity tumor presents a surface that lends to biopsy at the time of initial clinical presentation. During this time, a biopsy specimen obtained with the use of local anesthetics and biting forceps greatly helps in the diagnosis. So tumors contained within the sinus cavities are ideally sampled transnasally or through the nose or through the nasal cavity because transcutaneous or transmucosal approaches may reach the margins of the subsequent en bloc resection. So at the back of your mind, you must still be mindful of the possibility of a vascular tumor or encephalocele during biopsy of a unilateral nasal mass. So usually palpation for the tumor with an instrument demonstrates its solid nature, If the mass is soft or cystic, the patient should be asked to perform a Valsalva maneuver. Okay? So while you're observing it endoscopically. So expansion of the mass implies an intracranial connection or major venous connection. So if you still doubt it, or if there's still doubt uh, about the origin of the tumor, you can do an aspiration, okay, with a uh, fine gauge spinal needle, so that it would reach the sinuses, especially if it's deep within, before you do the initial biopsy with your cup forceps. So para maliit lang muna yung butas niya. Okay? So if the needle aspirate consists of CSF or blood, so CT scan, MRI, and possibly angiography should be considered uh, before doing a biopsy. So if none of the preceding methods are achieved or has achieved satisfactory material for histologic examination, the tumor must be approached directly, or you should excise the whole tumor. So a surgical procedure appropriate to the lesion must be selected, such as frontal trephination, transseptal sphenoidotomy, intranasal arthrostomy, or external ethmoidectomy. So surgical excision through a standard endoscopic sinus surgical approach is also appropriate when possible. And the operation should be designed to minimize disruption of a later en bloc resection or removal of the tumor. So biopsy may be the only surgical procedure carried out during the patient's treatment. And in that case, wide drainage of the sinus should be carried out at the time of biopsy to allow for the drainage of necrotic debris that results from subsequent therapy, like for example, your radiation therapy. Okay. So I mentioned before about Dr. Ongren. So in 1933, Ongren described or emphasized the ominous importance of tumor spread in a posterior or superior direction. So we have the Ongren's line, which is described as an imaginary line extending from the medial canthus of the uh, medial canthus to the angle of the jaw. So this gives a rough estimate of the dividing the lineup between the tumors. It may be resected with a good prognosis or a poor prognosis. So Unger developed a staging system based on his personal experience. It included tumor location extent. Of course, that also includes a histology and its cervical metastasis. So tumors located below the Unger's line, okay, involve fewer critical structures and were associated with better survival uh, than those compared with the lesions above this line, so which involves more important structures, okay, such as the orbit, the optic nerves, the carotid artery. So that system was effective uh, or is born out of his researcher statistics, and this follows a clearly difference in rates of 3 years, freedom of symptoms. So according to AJCC, staging of nasal cavity and paranasal sinus carcinomas is not well established as compared with other head and neck tumors. So for cancer of the maxillary sinus, the nasal cavity, and the ethmoid sinus, the committee is designated staging system by TNM classification. So you have the tumor itself, okay, um, including the location, okay, the presence of nodes, and of course, presence of metastasis. So this system is well accepted, although an adjustment based on Harrison's criticism of it should be considered as well. So in particular, she argued that the orbital apex involvement, the pterygoid muscle involvement should be placed in the T4 category. So the sixth edition of AJCC does differentiate between the resectability of lesions T4A and the unresectable lesion of T4B of the maxillary sinus. Okay, so patients would most likely ask, if you're the attending, would most likely ask the patients and the relatives rather, would ask about the stage of the cancer, and this would most likely be the one that they're referring to. Okay. Um, so you may use this stage grouping to simply make it simpler for them. Okay. So you have 0 to 4C. Okay. So based on this table, SCCA is still the leading type of carcinoma found in the nose and the paranasal sinuses, followed by the differentiated paracarcinomas. Then you have the adenoid cystic, the adenocarcinoma, the malignant melanoma, esthesia neuroblastoma, already ranking six. But this changed over the years as the exposure to carcinogen also changes. For SCCA, the still rampant um, involved structure would be the nasopharynx, and that mostly is caused by exposure to nitrates or nitrites. Okay. So an honorable mention for an intermediate neoplasm is the inverted papilloma, and this usually manifests as a polypoid unilateral nasal mass. So on occasion, these lesions may be found in association with uh, allergic nasal polyps, and accounting for the need in routine polypectomy to always submit labeled separate specimens for each side of the nose. So even when non-malignant, inverted papillomas must be treated with respect because incomplete excision is likely would most likely result to recurrence, and this is because of its local aggressiveness, which can have ophthalmologic or neurologic consequences. So a lateral rhinotomy incision combined with medial maxillectomy to allow adequate margins is the classic approach. However, uh, experienced surgeons with the endoscopic sinus surgery supports a less invasive approach, and um, this could be applicable in carefully selected cases. Okay. So the ethmoid, sphenoid, and frontal sinus tumors are especially likely to manifest at advanced stages. And these tumors, tumor extension to the structures of the skull base can be expected at initial presentation in around 50% of patients with these lesions. So involvement of the cervical nodes occurs in about 25 to 30%, 35% of PNS tumors. So, and most would agree that palpable cervical lymph nodes indicate a very poor prognosis. But in contrast, Shidnia suggests that if the neck disease is discovered at an early stage, it can be successfully managed with neck dissection. So that would halt the progression of the tumor. Okay, so let's go now to specific um, pathologies of the PNS. So we have first the adenocarcinomas, which have an epidemiologic association with woodworking, furniture making, and those people working with leather. So they're more commonly found in the upper nasal cavity and the ethmoid sinus, and they're usually lethal by virtue of local progression. In light of its propensity for aggressive local progression, adenocarcinoma should be treated in a surgically aggressive fashion with en bloc resection whenever possible. Okay. So adenoid cystic carcinomas are more likely to express distant metastasis than regional metastasis, although the most likely cause of death is still local progression at the skull base. So management relies on surgical resection with radiotherapy added if the margins are in question. And there are recommendations using only one major modality, either surgery or irradiation, at the time because the fiber survival is good and late recurrence is virtually a certainty. So this recommendation is based on a desire to hold potentially effective treatment modality in reserve. And this would make you wonder if whether this approach is treating the patient or the physician, because we do not really know whether combined therapy or combined treatment decreases the recurrence rate or increases the disease-free interval. So a contrasting opinion was offered which was recommending a three-modality therapy, including regional infusion with 5-FE or 5-fluorouracil, maxillary resection, and then irradiation or radiotherapy subsequent after which. Okay. We also have osteogenic sarcomas and chondrosarcomas of the facial skeleton, which are encountered more commonly in the mandible than in the maxilla. So they're usually lethal by local progression. So in that light, the most successful therapy is still based on wide and block resection. Although they still have a 5-year survival rate of around 10 to 20%. Okay. So malignant melanomas of the paranasal sinuses are usually advanced at the time of diagnosis or discovery. So in addition to symptoms typical of sinus tumors, the patient may note a black nasal discharge and have a pigmented mass within the nose. So frequently, regional or distant metastases exist at the time of initial examination, and although aggressive surgical removal is still the standard of care, it's still not that very effective. Radiation therapy has been considered inadequate, but adjustment in fractionation may provide better results as suggested by some experts who achieved local control in 3 of 6 patients that they treated with diagnosed with nasal melanoma, um, initially treated with radiation therapy. So a study showed similar poor survival for mucosal melanoma of the PNS and revealed an overall 5-year survival rate of around 22%. I think I've only seen one patient with malignant melanoma since my residency. But this patient presented with epistaxis, uncontrollable epistaxis rather than so that's the initial presenting symptom. Uh, so this patient was diagnosed here, but eventually he needed to go to, I think, Singapore or Taiwan. But eventually the patient still succumbed to the malignancy. So this is really an aggressive tumor. Okay. So definitive treatment has included surgery, radiation therapy, electrocoagulation in varying combinations. Uh, Adjunctive chemotherapy has been introduced, but its impact on outcome is still uncertain. Brachytherapy is also an option, but may be limited by its reach and its effective or its effect may have or its effect may reach the surrounding structures. So with this treatment, there will always be the risk of losing the vision. So patients are always advised on this risk prior to undergoing surgical removal or radiotherapy. But for surgical treatment, okay, so we have the open approach. Okay, you can utilize the external ethmoidectomy, medial maxillectomy, inferior medial maxillectomy, radical maxillectomy, craniofacial frontal ethmoidectomy, an extended craniofacial resection, or a full craniofacial resection. Okay, so as I've mentioned before, regarding endoscopic management, so advancements in imaging combined with extensive experience with image-guided endoscopic surgery with chemoradiotherapy regimens have significantly altered attitudes regarding the optimal approach to sinus malignancies. So multiple institutional series are published to document the value of endoscopic approaches. And common to all publications is a philosophy that includes endoscopic resection as one, but not the only treatment option to be considered in the management of individual patients. So small, purely endonasal tumors can be effectively managed endoscopically, and lesions that involve the perimeter of the sinonasal region, like for example, the orbit and the cranium, require consideration of combining endoscopic with various open procedures. So a surgical procedure that begins with an endoscopic resection to define the involved areas in combination with a flexible plan for a combined open approach as dictated by the endoscopic findings usually results in the least invasive and most accurate tumor resection. Okay. As for prognosis, 5-year survival of all penis malignancies is only approximately 50%. Um, Neck metastasis is found in around 3 to 20% of patients, though medyo advanced na yan. Distant metastasis around 70 to 25%. And the difference in variation is dependent on the type of tumor. Okay. So SCCA, sinonasal undifferentiated carcinoma, and mucosal melanoma is more aggressive than esthesioneuroblastoma and adenoid cystic carcinomas in adults. For pediatric patients, rhabdomyosarcoma is the more common pathology. So that's my last slide. It's my reference. I only got it from one book, so if you're interested, it won't be hard to find. Uh, it won't be hard to find. So, thank you. Other questions? Clarifications? I wasn't able to mention uh, in detail about nasopharyngeal carcinoma. Okay, so patients with NPCA usually presents with still with epistaxis. Some would present with um, cervical lymphadenopathies at the posterior neck, okay, or level 5, because that's where it drains. Uh, some would also complain of hearing problem or obstruction, okay, on one side of the nose, or unilateral nasal obstruction. And this would warrant endoscopy, okay, and of course biopsy. Biopsy can be done under local anesthesia, but some would prefer doing it under general anesthesia because of the control of, mostly for hemostasis. Okay, there are no more questions still. It's only 10:36 on my time. Kung wala na, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Recording stopped.